All right, so we like to start on time here. So I will go ahead and get us off with a good start here. My name is Vanessa Castillo Bell. I'm with Local First Arizona, part of the entrepreneurial support team. Local First Arizona is a statewide nonprofit dedicated to empowering small business. Also, building an economy that works for everyone by helping businesses access tools, resources just like this, and connections to grow stronger together. Today's workshop is titled 2026 Growth Playbook, and you're in for a good treat. People, processes, and tools to scale your small business. We're excited to welcome Amanda Thomas, the founder of the Fractionals and a certified exit planning advisor. Before we begin, just a quick housekeeping note. Today's workshop is being recorded and will be added to our local learning lab on our website for public viewing. We kindly ask that you remain muted during and share any questions in the chat as they come up. At the end of the presentation, we will end the recording before opening it up for questions and discussions. So please join me in welcoming Amanda Thomas.
Okay. Hi, guys. Thank you for being here today. I'm excited to be here with you. Share my screen here and we will start rocking and rolling. So, like Vanessa said, today we are going to be talking about 2026, growing your businesses, focusing mostly on the people, processes, and systems to scale your small business. So a little bit about me. I do have a small corporate background. I was with fitness industries, Lifetime Fitness and the YMCA for a few years before starting my own business in 2007. It was a cleaning business that I had for 14 years, and I successfully exited that in 2021. So combining all of that experience, I have over 20 years, about 24 years of leading and growing teams. I recently did also become a certified exit planning advisor because of the work that I do with small businesses. I focus on how do you get the business owners out of the business, and that is one of the key things that has to happen for a business to transfer to a new owner. So when I had my business, I could never really decide if I wanted to sell it or if I wanted to grow it. And finally, it hit me. Those two things are the steps that you take are exactly the same. It's just that decision point when you want to exit. How do you set yourself up is by growing your business that makes it more attractive to sell. And so that's why I became a certified exit planning advisor so I could bring this information that is usually only provided through financial planners and accountants and kind of the more that finance side to larger businesses. I wanted to bring that to the small business owners that I work with as well. Um, I am also a human. I am married. My husband and I have been married this year will be 20 years. Our son is 9. He'll be 10 this year. He's a competitive tennis player, but he was born into a traveling family. So if you see that picture on the left, when I was pregnant, we were actually living in an RV and traveling the southern United States. And I would fly back for my doctor's appointments and to check on our businesses. But our son literally was born into a roaming kind of family. So we love to travel still, and now we do it for tennis tournaments. Who knew that competitive tennis for a 9-year-old would get you traveling on the road? But we do. So that's a little bit about us. So I want to do a quick poll today and find out who is in the room. And so Vanessa is going to pop this up on the screen. If you can just click on there, what type of business do you have? So professional service, trades business, retail or food, content or online education, personal service, or other. I'd just like to get an idea of who all is here today. And Vanessa, when we've got a little chunk of them, if you can just flip that over. Okay, awesome. So mostly professional services, and some retail food and other. So that's awesome. Okay. What we're going to talk about first is why you want to grow. If you've heard that book, Start with Why. It's a very popular thing, but growing is not easy. Growing can actually be pretty darn painful at times. And so we really want to focus first on why you want to grow your business. And there's four main reasons. One is typically for money. You want to have higher revenue, you want to have higher profit, you want to be able to do more things with your business or do more things personally. You may want more time. So, a lot of small business owners get stuck in the rut of working 16-hour days, 7 days a week, and that's just not sustainable. So maybe you want to get back some of your time. Or it could be that you want to improve your lifestyle. So maybe you want to be able to take more vacations. You kind of linked with time. Maybe you even just want to be able to go to your kids' sporting events or their music performances. You want to be able to spend more time doing personal things, working on hobbies. You want to change your lifestyle by growing your business. Or the fourth reason is that you already are thinking about exiting your business. I would encourage everyone to think about exiting and how you want to exit because the reality is you are going to exit your business at some point. So the ideal is that you get to make the decision to exit and you get to do it in a way that is good for you. And that's usually by selling your business or something along those lines. But the reality is you're not going to live forever. And there's things that happen along the way that may force you to sell your business. You may become disabled and not be able to run your business. You may get divorced. You may have disagreements with your business partners. All these kinds of things can force an exit. And so, even if you're not thinking you're going to sell your business in the next few years, it is really, really good to start thinking about that right now. So, another quick little poll. I want to know, why are you guys in this room today? So, we've got these four main reasons. What's driving you to grow your business right now? You guys didn't know you were going to get pop quizzes today, did you? Okay, I'll give another second for another couple more answers here. Okay. Mostly money, a little bit of time, and a little bit of lifestyle. And that is exactly what I would expect from small businesses. Usually, once we start getting more employees and more things happening in the business, then we start to have some different views. But this is where I would think we are right now. So before we get into growth, we're going to talk about why growth doesn't work. And there's three main reasons why growing your business doesn't work, even when you have a good plan. So first, and this is the biggest thing, is that growing your business requires personal development. Now, that's just not for your team. That is mostly for you as the owner. Your business is not going to be able to grow beyond the point where you can take it. And if you don't work on your leadership skills, your knowledge, your business skills, your management skills, all of those kinds of things, your business will stall out in its growth. So you have to do a lot there. Second of all, is that a lot of business owners go with reactionary growth. They get approached, they get a big lead, a big potential client. They take on this client, they react to what this client needs. And then all of a sudden that client goes away and they're back scrambling. And so you're building your business based on what's coming at you instead of being intentional. It's also how a lot of businesses end up taking on clients that they don't like, client work that they don't want to be doing, because they're just taking any money that's coming toward them and being very reactionary. And that is a normal phase to go through, but it doesn't stick for very long and it often ends up in burnout. And the third thing that I see, why growth doesn't work for a lot of businesses, is that the business owners are planning without looking at their blind spots. So when I start working with a client, I'm a fractional integrator, which means I am working with businesses that have teams between about 3 and 15 people when I start working with them and they're wanting to grow. So I always start off my engagement with a client. For the first 30 days, I'm just learning what is going on in the business. And what the owner thinks is happening in the business and what the employees think is happening in the business, there's always a discrepancy. And that's my role, is to figure out what is the discrepancy there. Is there a huge gap or is it just a little gap? Do we just need to get aligned a little bit? But those employees always, always see things that the owner is a complete or has as a complete blind spot. And it's sometimes the owner's strengths and weaknesses. It can be clients that are really the owner is trying to hold on to and it's really holding things back. But you, as the owner, have one view, and your team and your clients have other views. And if you only go with your own view, you're going to have blind spots. And that is a big reason why growth doesn't always work. So, the basics of growth, there are 4 steps to a basic growth cycle. Okay. First, we need to plan. We need to have our goals and our strategy. Our steps need to get defined. What do we need to do? What are we wanting to achieve? What's the next goals that we have, whether it's revenue or team count, whatever it is, we have to define what it is. Then we need to start building the tools and the structure to support those new goals. And then we need to implement and we need to test. And so if you guys have ever watched the show Bar Rescue, this is a great example of it. This guy goes into these bars that are failing and he puts in a new menu and he trains the team. And then they have a test night where they bring in like everybody from the community and they open the doors and the bars fill up and they see how does the business do with this massive stress test. Okay. This is what you want to think about doing for your business every time you're growing. How do you stress the business and see what works and what doesn't work? This point in the business should start showing you the cracks in what you're doing. That's going to show you what you need to fix next. Because after that, you're going to evaluate you're going to come down off of a peak, hopefully in revenue or a peak season. And you evaluate what went well, what didn't go well, what do we want to do differently next time? And then this cycle just repeats. So knowing that, you want to determine first when is the right time to grow, because not all the time is the right time for your business to start focusing on one of those growth cycles. So the first thing you need to look at is, are you financially able to support increasing capacity? Growth costs money. Okay. There is no way around it. You are going to have to spend money to be able to increase your capacity. And oftentimes we have to build that capacity to be able to fill it. Otherwise, what's happening is more reactionary. We take on the big client, we quickly hire people in to fill it. And then once that client goes away, we have to deal with it afterwards. So if you really want to have sustainable growth, you have to create that capacity and the systems that will support the growth before the business comes in. So there's 2 ways to do that, 2 main ways. First is through working capital, cash flow, which basically is a fancy way of saying, do you have enough money every month to support paying for a new software, a new person, or anything else that is going to need to get put into place? You can do that through the money that you have in your business right now. If that's possible, that's one way that you can fund your growth. The other way is through growth capital, or basically like a bank account. So think of that as like you've saved up a chunk of money. You've got, $20,000 sitting there that you're okay hiring somebody because you can supplement with that chunk of money if if the revenue doesn't increase in time to support it with cash flow. Or maybe you get an investor, friend or family member or whoever it is to help invest in the business, or you get a loan. All of these basically equate to the same thing. You have a bank account that you're pulling money from if your working capital or cash flow profit doesn't support your growth. If you don't have these, don't plan to grow yet, is my biggest advice, because you're going to get into a negative cash flow situation and that becomes a very scary point. So focus on getting your money set so that way you can go into growth. Now, the next thing to think about when you're determining when to grow are your annual trends. When does it make sense to start that growth cycle that we just talked about? So I'm going to give you an example from my business when I had my cleaning business. We focused on vacation rental cleaning. And so you can see we had some pretty big spikes in our revenue in March. March and April every year were about 50% bigger than January and February. Like huge spikes. We had to be able to have that capacity. Okay. And so that's when the tourists were coming. That's when we had to maximize on revenue. And then it would drop way down in June, July, August, September. People travel here in those months, but not as much. And so we really took big dips in the summertime. This was our cycle year after year. Now, when you think about the basics, this growth cycle and these 4 steps, most of these usually, I'd say, take about a quarter of a year. So if you plan in the first quarter and you build in the second quarter, you implement and test. In the third quarter, you evaluate in the fourth quarter. That's kind of usually how most businesses go because they're thinking about it as like, a calendar year. And that's what I did for years. And so what we were doing was building and planning and building during our busiest time of the year. And then we were trying to test systems and see if they worked when we had the lowest amount of business happening. And so we just didn't get good data. And then we were evaluating at the end of the year because that's what you do at the end of the year. You think, how did everything go? What do we want to do next year? Okay, that's how you plan on a calendar year. And for some businesses, that makes sense. My business, because of that cycle, it did not. So what we started to do is we shifted to a fiscal year. And if you've heard the term fiscal year but aren't sure what it means, it basically means that you start looking at the year based on your business operations. And so we started to look at ours from a July to a June fiscal year. And what this did was it allowed us to plan during our quietest times of the year. July, August, and September was when we did our annual planning. Then we started in October, November, and December. We made sure that we had the systems and processes and people in place to then in January, February, and March be able to test it. And it was all hands on deck. Even my office team, my bookkeepers, everybody who worked in the company, including myself, was back out cleaning homes in March because it was that busy. So we didn't have time to deal with all like anything. It had to be set up so everything could just run during that month, and then we could get through it and evaluate in April, May, and June. Okay, so this made a huge, huge difference in my business. I fought for years, like trying to stick on that calendar year and thinking I needed to do my annual planning in December. And in reality, my business, I had to do it during the quiet time of the year so we could focus on building to get to that next peak. So this is, if you only take one thing out of here, is that this might not be the right time of the year for you to focus on growth, but it might be the time to start thinking about when the right time is. So, like I said, we want to think about those peaks in your cycles. We want to build the capacity to handle a new peak every year in your revenue, in your capacity, whatever your peak times are. You might have one peak time of year. You might have two peak times, depending on your business. Every business I have worked with, even the ones who are like, no, we don't have any peaks. Our business is really steady month over month. When we start to look at it year over year, almost every type of business, for reasons outside of the business's control, have peaks. So start to look for those revenue peaks, okay? They usually repeat. To be able to handle bigger ones, if you want to increase those peaks by 20%, you're going to have to change things in your business, specifically the people, the processes, and your systems. So we're going to get into some details here. We're going to start with the people. Got this little cartoon here. No, it's not abstract. It's our org chart. This is not uncommon, okay? Especially when a business is growing. The org chart is just kind of all over the place. Everybody's doing everything. Everybody steps in. And it's really common when I start with a business for people to say, well, we all just work together. We all handle everything, because, we can all handle everything with a client. If you want to grow, you've got to start to get some structure to that. So there's a hard truth about growing your team, and that is that not everyone on your team is going to be excited for growth. Okay, there are going to be people who actually don't want the business to grow because they don't want their job to change. But that's a really, really good thing. It's really hard for owners to see people on their team who aren't excited, but please do not be afraid of that. Okay, and I'm going to tell you why here. When you think about your people, first of all, there are people who just don't like change. So it's your job to give them confidence and to lead them through it. But the second reality is that your business needs to keep running, and you need a set team of people who can create stability during growth. Not everybody can focus on growth because some people have to keep the day-to-day running. So those people who are your steady eddies are the fantastic ones to just let do their job while you have a team who can have the attention and the time and the desire to really focus on growth with you. Okay. Not everybody on your team is going to focus on growth. I'm going to say it again because it's that important. And as business owners, like I said, it's really hard when you see an employee who just wants to do their job, but those people are absolutely essential in your business, especially when you are growing. So we got to start thinking about the accountability chart. We're going to go back to that org chart, accountability chart, whatever you want to call it. Um, it's basically the roles that are needed in your business to get to the next level and the responsibilities that are needed. And so when you think about your accountability chart or your org chart, you usually want to think about 1 year out. Especially when your business is young, your org chart is going to change about every year. Okay. There are some really key growth points in businesses. It's usually around 3 employees is pretty hard to get through because you have to actually have like a culture for the business to get through. It can't just be this unspoken language that 3 people can do. So to get past 3 employees is a sticking point. To get past 7 employees, you have to have somebody else who's helping manage the business. There's another sticking point there. And around 15, you have to have another layer of like supervisors or managers in there. And so your accountability chart is going to change as your business grows. So when we start off, usually it's the owner and a few employees that are kind of in that technician role. Okay. Then it goes to the owner with maybe a manager and a few employees or a supervisor or a key employee who's doing more than the other technicians. That relationship really starts to develop kind of as the second phase. The third phase that you get to over on the right is you've got the owner, then you've got a couple managers, and usually that's an office type manager, a back end, and a front end manager, somebody who's managing the client work. Okay. It could look different depending on what type of business you're in, but those are the two kind of basic ones. Eventually, you will get somebody who's also looking at finance, but finance is sometimes under the office for a while, and you may start to get marketing and sales, but that often stays under that office back end person for a little while until the business is big enough to branch out. Then underneath the managers, you start to have supervisors because a manager can't manage everybody. Okay. The ideal number for supervising is somewhere around 7. So once you get past 7 people, you typically need another person to help support. Especially if you have a 7-day-a-week business, you need people who can help so your main person can have a day off. So all of these transitions are going to start to happen. Now, when you think about who is going to focus on helping grow the business, in the beginning, usually it's just the owner. Okay. When you've got that second phase, it's usually the owner and the key employee and maybe one of the technicians, but the other technicians really need to do their jobs and keep the business running. And then as you get a larger team, you're usually going to have the owner, your managers, and then a few key people from each department. It might be a supervisor, it might be a couple technicians. These are people who are going to have the desire, time, and ability, the knowledge, whatever it is that you need to have on your growth team to help you achieve the goals and do the tasks that it takes to grow your business. So now we're going to get into processes. And we've got another little cartoon here for you. Now, I really like this one because not only, this talks about a marriage here, but this really happens in business quite a bit too. So a lot of times that boss will come in and go, hey, I've got a better way for you to do it. And then the employee maybe doesn't quite do it right. And we, as the owners, take it back on as our own tasks because we know that we can get it done in 10 minutes instead of 20 minutes. So just keep this in mind as you're thinking about processes. The key with processes is whatever get you from point A to point B probably isn't going to get you from point B to point C. That doesn't mean they were bad. It doesn't mean they were wrong. It just means that they won't get you to your next goals, or they might not. So when we think about processes, we need to look at which processes will need to stay in place, which ones will need to go, and which ones will need to change. Another thing we need to look at, especially as you start to develop your team, is you as an owner, where are you becoming a bottleneck? Okay. And every owner at some point becomes a bottleneck. Okay. Your team isn't willing to make a big decision. They're coming to you with lots of questions. Things are getting stuck in your inbox. People are waiting for you. And this is very common, but you've got to define where that's happening because those are the things that we need to start having other people do. So we have to define and document those processes, which leads into step three is making sure that all the processes that your team is needing to do to get the job done are documented, trained, and repeatable. Okay. So this exercise is one that I love to do with teams. If you have a group if you have employees, this is a really easy exercise to do with them. So what you do is you lay out your growth goals. Hey guys, here's where we were in 2025. Here's where we want to be in 2026. Paint the picture for them. Describe it in as much detail as you can. How many people are we going to need? How many clients are we going to serve? And most teams tend to understand more in the ways of like, this is how many employees we're going to have, this is how many clients we're going to serve, this is how many transactions we're going to do. That's more tangible to them than our revenue is going to go from here to here. Okay, so just think about that. But paint that picture for them, help them see what you want it to look like by the end of the year. And then say, okay, if we're going to do that, if we're going to achieve those goals, what do we need to start doing as a team, as a company? What things do we need to start doing? What do we need to stop doing? On this one, you're going to see believing it's the client's fault. Okay. You can't blame your clients anymore. You've got to be able to take on some of those decisions. These are all things that got laid out by an actual company we work with. And then also making sure they put what we need to keep doing. Because, like I said, some of those processes are going to be able to get you from point A to point C. So don't throw out don't throw out all of them just because you got to point B and you need to now get from B to C. Okay. So start, stop, keep. The way that I run this with the team is after I put the vision out there of where we want to be going, I have everybody start writing down on a piece of paper. And this is key. Don't start putting this on the whiteboard right away. Have everybody write down on a piece of paper the start, the stop, the keep. Okay. Then, if you have a larger team, have them pair up and start to compare their notes. This helps them get out even more ideas on paper and then take it up to the whiteboard. Because what happens if you do it straight up on a whiteboard is there's always somebody who controls the narrative a little bit more than others. There's always somebody who's a little bit more outspoken on a team. And if you have everybody write things down, it's a lot easier to start calling on people and saying, what else did you have? Did you have anything else that we don't have on the board yet? And then they can just look at their list and it just gets a lot more ideas on the board. Then what you do with this is you start to look at what do we need to change in terms of how we do things based on these recommendations. You can start picking out the top ones, which one's going to make the most impact. But getting the ideas out of your team's head helps you avoid the blind spots that we talked about earlier on. Okay. Another thing that you will need to do in terms of processes, and this is kind of a cross between processes and systems, is meetings. As you grow your team, communication is going to become key. The biggest recommendation I have is if you're ready to grow your business, you need to have weekly growth meetings. You can call them growth meetings. You can call them L10s, level 10s, if you like the EOS version of things. These are weekly meetings, 45 to 60 minutes, and they are growth and goal focused. It's typically just your leadership team or your growth team, depending on how you've structured this. You also need to have full team meetings. So this is a point in time where all of your company comes together, all of your employees, you give them breakfast or lunch or whatever. They get to see each other, they get to talk to each other. You get to tell them what is the state of the company, what's the state of your industry. You get to paint that picture for how you guys are doing, and they get to start to hear what it looks like in your head. This is crucial if you want to grow. They need to hear so often what is going on in your head to help them stay aligned with why they are going through all the pain points of growing. Okay. These meetings need to be well planned and worthwhile. Otherwise, they're going to get resentful. I usually recommend having these monthly or quarterly Don't do a monthly if you don't have 60 minutes of great content for your team. And if you need help facilitating those, reach out to somebody like myself or other meeting facilitators to help run these, because the last thing you want is to have your team show up to meetings that they don't feel value from. The third type of meetings that you're going to need to start doing are your planning sessions. So this is your leadership and your growth team. This is not just you as an owner. A lot of times I see owners, especially of small businesses, working with coaches and doing annual planning with their coaches, which is a great place to start, but you miss the blind spots. So make sure you're incorporating your team in this. You can come up with your coach, you can come up with your vision for the year and kind of the overall goals, but you need to incorporate the team. So this is annual, you want to do this, and then you want to have quarterly check-ins or even just a mid-year check-in. An annual planning session is typically 1 to 2 days. Quarterly or semi-annual, you want to check in for at least a half a day and see how everybody's doing on the goals. And then the last one that I recommend teams put into place is really done is daily huddles. This is most effective if your team comes to a location and then either disperses or all starts work at the same time. These are a little bit harder to do with teams that are kind of all spread out and working independently. With my cleaning business, it didn't make a lot of sense. My team wasn't, they were starting jobs at different times. They were working on jobs that were not related to each other. These can look like production meetings if you are in a creative business. You touch base on how are these jobs doing, who needs what. These are very quick, 15 minutes max. Okay. So those are some of the meetings you're going to start to want to incorporate. Now we're going to get into systems and software. And big surprise, we've got one last cartoon for you here. And I think we all can relate to this. And if you haven't yet, just know this is normal. We've all gone through that where you get this piece of software and then you're like, crap. Now we gotta get it integrated into the business. We've got to get it set up. It's not just installing it. We've got to import. We've got to do all of the things. Software is a necessary evil in our businesses. So we want to keep an eye on what is the goal of software and systems in a business. First, it has to make it easier to repeat processes and track results. Second, software should be allowing your current team to do more by reducing busy work for them. So you want to look for repeatable things in your business, processes that people are running manually, and that's where you can bring in software. Okay. Now, almost every industry has kind of a gold standard or a couple gold standards of softwares, but they're not realistic when you're a small business. So usually what starts to happen for us small business owners is we do go through the Band-Aid phase. And this is the phase that's really similar to like a pharmaceutical commercial on TV where it tells you like all the good things, but then all of the bad things it's going to cause on the back end. And by the way, you're going to have to get medications for all these side effects. Same thing happens in software. You get one piece of software, and it's great, but it doesn't do this. So then you need to get a piece of software to do this one thing that this one didn't do, but it opens up a whole new problem. And all of a sudden you've got 17 softwares that you have a subscription to on a monthly basis. And it works for a while. But over time, it creates friction, it creates cost. Okay. So eventually, it does make sense to consolidate. And it might not be to that gold standard for your industry yet, but there might be a better software. So you want to ask yourself on a periodic basis, is our software still effective? Or are we starting to outgrow it? Because as your business grows, you are going to outgrow software. Is it saving us time or is it wasting time? And what I mean by that is sometimes we have software, but then we have to go in and do manual work on the side. An example is I started working with a business recently that I was pulling reports to see how much time employees were spending on specific specific projects that they were doing. The report that it would kick out in the amount of time column, instead of saying 63 minutes, it said 1H3M. I had to go through because Excel doesn't know what to do with 1H3M. I had to go through and manually convert every single one of those cells into 63 to get how many minutes it took at those jobs. That is a wasting time to be able to get the information. Okay, so you have to look at you and question your software to really figure out if it's saving you time or if there's manual work that your team is having to do because it's creating duplicates of things or whatever it's doing on the back end. Third, is it saving you money? There are times where the band-aids you get so many band-aid softwares that if you went to that gold standard software, it would actually save you money. And that's something that you should always be kind of looking at is what does a gold standard do and how much would it replace? And then fourth is really starting to think about how long before we outgrow this software setup that we have. Like I said, you will outgrow it. So it doesn't hurt to document what are the things that may start happening to show us that we outgrow it before we do. And just a key note here, changing your software is something that belongs in the planning and the early build phases. Please, please, please never change your software when you are going into a peak time where you are going to stress the business. Software changes and implementation always take longer than you think they're going to. And the last thing you want is to go into your peak season when you're hoping to maximize revenue and profit, and your team is fighting a new piece of software that they don't know how to use. Okay, so just make sure you line those up with timing. Okay. So for small businesses, there are a few different pieces of software that we recommend, and we are going to be sending out a checklist of all of these steps that I've outlined here, and we will also include some of these recommendations. Some of these are probably familiar to you. QuickBooks is definitely one that a lot of people are familiar with. If you are still doing paper invoices for your clients, like you are literally writing them out, taking a picture of it and emailing it to somebody, please consider getting like a base level of QuickBooks. It just creates so much more clarity for everybody involved. I work with a property management company and some of the vendors that work, some of the landscapers and cleaning companies that work for that service that business still send those invoices in, and it just gets confusing because there's confusion over which invoices get paid and all that kind of stuff. Something like QuickBooks really helps get that aligned. ClickUp is fantastic for repeatable processes. Your client onboarding process. If you have specific steps when your clients come on, you can plug those into a template in ClickUp, and whoever is running that onboarding session with your client can take those steps. Same thing with your team onboarding. Anything that repeats in your business can be put into ClickUp very easily, and it's very affordable. Monday.com, if you aren't familiar with it, it is basically spreadsheets on steroids that can do automations. And I don't know a better way to explain it really, but if there are one of the best ways we have integrated that into a business that we work with, the business does annual inspections for compliance for buildings. And they were sending out to their clients because they wanted to be helpful. Every year, they would manually write up an email to every single one of their clients and send it out to them to remind them that it was time for their inspection. It was a very nice thing they were doing. We were able to put it into Monday, and now every month, hundreds of emails go out automatically. The customers have the same experience that they get this friendly reminder that to watch for their inspection notice, but it's all automatic. And so you can only imagine how much time that saved and how much more efficient this is and more effective, because if the person sending those emails was out sick or on vacation, some of those reminders just didn't go out. We never have to worry about that with Monday. And then last one is 90.io. When we talk about those L10 meetings and getting everybody on the same page, 90.io is absolutely fantastic. It is EOS based. If you're familiar with EOS, the book Traction, entrepreneurial or operating system, 90 puts everything into one place. And the biggest reason we recommend it is for the meetings, because it pulls in your goals, it pulls in your scorecard, your data, it pulls in your to-do list, all of the things that we're usually keeping in like Google Drive and in QuickBooks and all this kind of stuff come together so you can talk about them and have very efficient meetings. So these are 4 that we recommend. And like I said, we'll send these out to you if you want to check them out. So we're just about done, but we're going to have a little bonus section here because we talked about what needs to change to be able to handle the growth. We talked people, processes, and systems. there is a fourth, and that is you, the owner's mindset. I mentioned it earlier. Your business cannot grow if you do not increase where you think your business can go. And so, along with those software recommendations, we've got three key book recommendations. We'll send these out to you in an email as well. John C. Maxwell is an author that I would recommend. He has a ton of books, and the thing I like about them is they are little books. Like they are short, they are to the point, they are physically small books, super easy to read, but they are also very informative. They pack a punch of how to increase your leadership skills. Brene Brown's Dare to Lead is one that if you are fighting some head trash or trying to figure out why you believe that you can't do this in your business, or you just don't even know, like if it really gets into the psyche of what you're thinking, and is a fantastic book to really start to understand like what your thoughts are doing to your day-to-day actions. And Dan Martell's Buy Back Your Time is absolutely fantastic. If you want to start to think about getting more time back for yourself, how do you utilize your team, utilizing a team in your life in general and in your business to get back more of your time? It is really, if you have employees, especially, I would recommend all three of these. If you don't have employees yet, I would probably start with Brene Brown's books. They really do, like I said, all of these pack a punch here. So, with that said, we are going to stop the recording here. I will take down my screen and we will open up the Q&A sections.